using the various copy and paste and healing brush tools to create a seamless repeat. So in Photoshop, you may have a piece of artwork that you have done that you would like to turn into some sort of a repeat. And it may look fine, but then when you go to throw it into the swatches, you will find that it does not repeat particularly well. Like so. And it's quite harsh when you're looking at it as a repeating element. So there's various things you can do. And for me, I like the filter other offset as a way to move those side edges into the center of your document so that you can really see how it's going to be repeating. All right, I have this really harsh edge down here. So the first thing I want to do is I'm actually just going to do a little grab using my lasso. Just make sure I'm working on sometimes you can't work on the background layer because it's automatically locked. So I'm going to hit up here and just grab some of my foliage. Control C, Control V. You'll see Photoshop has created a new layer for it automatically. And then I'm just going to literally put that in front of there. Control T, I'll make it a little bigger. And then hit enter. If you find an edge of something is a little harsh, you can always create a copy of it. Go to the underneath copy and then do filter, which is the pull down menu, blur, Gaussian blur. And what that does is it blurs the edges of your shape. Right? Gives it a much softer edge. And if I didn't have the one underneath, you would see that. Oops, if I turn off the visibility, it's just basically blurred out. But if you've got the one on top of it, it gives it a nice softer edge that's a little cleaner with the rest of your artwork. And I think I'm going to grab, that's fine. Some of this up here because I like how that looks. And I'm going to, again, just grab a little of that artwork. Control C, Control V. Oh, make sure you are on a layer that you can copy from because I'm on a layer here, but there's nothing in that section because this is the layer that has my little cutout there, right? So what I want to do is go down to my artwork layer and Control C, Control V, And that will help me with that. And I think I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to create a copy of it, go down to the layer beneath, and then filter, blur, Gaussian blur. And you can see if I pull that in a little bit, if I pull it way out, it's very soft. And then closer I get to the shape, the tighter it will be. Okay, I'm getting back down my background layer here, and I want to get rid of some of this. I've got this super harsh line, and there's a very handy tool called the the patch tool. And what patch does is if you circle an area, and I'm working beneath that, so I'm not going to be selecting the shape that's above it. I'm only selecting on the back layer. See, I've got that little section in there. If you then pull and move to a different part of your drawing, it will copy that into where you are. And sometimes it works well, sometimes it doesn't. That's okay. I'm going to go back and do something else to clean that up after, but I'm first of all going to very quickly do my little patch. There we go. And I'll do the same thing for the verticals. That one's pretty intense. We'll see what it's going to look like. Oh, actually pretty good. All right. And then I'm going to do that one and maybe pull some red. Pretty smooth. And the last one I'm going to do is up here. And again, I'm going to, wherever else I'm copying from, it'll kind of blend it in. Sometimes it works real well like that. Sometimes it doesn't. This is going to need a little bit of help. So for that, I'm going to use the clone stamp tool, which is this one. And you can make the size of your brush larger or smaller with the bracket key. The right bracket makes it larger. Left bracket makes it smaller. And then wherever you click, you hit the Option key, and then you click in your artwork. The next place you click, it's going to copy, because I clicked up here, and copy that into this new section. You see I've got that crosshair up above. That is copying up there and bringing it down into the artwork quite nicely. Careful of things like when I hit the top of the drawing, all of a sudden it gets kind of boom. You can always fix that by moving to another spot, hit Option, and then once again, I'm back in here, and you can just soften that up a little bit. And that will help with those edges. Everything else is looking pretty good. Okay. So I'm going to Command or Control A, which is select all. And then I'm going to edit, pull down menu, and then define pattern. Fall leaves is fine. Okay. And if I go to my other artwork here, I can double click that, right, where it's filled it with my original, where it's got super sharp edges. And then the new one will be there beside it, and it gives me a much smoother and softer overall transition and pattern repeat in the artwork. And that can be done with textiles. That's probably the number one way we would use it would be in fabrics, because you can have a swatch of something, and then by doing that, you can clean up those edges so it does repeat beautifully. You can also do it with things like this more pictorial repeat pattern. And you can check the repeat by making it smaller and see how it's looking. That's not bad. And figure out the scale of it, how big or small you're going to want it to go. And that is using the filter other offset to create your seamless repeating pattern. I would have to rasterize that. I would have to flatten the image for me to be able to actually do the filter other offset, because right now it's just a pattern fill. But if I flatten the image or merge visible, either one, I would then be able to do this again. And you can always, like, if you've already done something, you can check it and see how well it's repeating, before you put it into a repeat. And that is how to do the seamless repeat. Managing your various repeat patterns. Okay, so if you have been working and creating a whole bunch of different patterns, I'm going to do File, New, Custom 8.5 by 11, 300 DPI. Going to use the cookie and I'm going to fill it with a pattern. All the patterns that you've been working on will be in the document that you've been working on them in. You also can save your patterns to reopen them in other documents if you've been working on your various patterns. And the way to do that is head up to the right-hand side. And I'm actually in the patterns palette. You have a whole palette that is patterns if you want to open that up and play around with it. It's the default that you pull down when you do the cookie and you do the fill, and then you do that to change it. You've got all those. You can actually access that quite easily in the palettes as well. And if you don't see it, you can go to Window, pull down, and then Patterns should be one of the options. You can always click on it if it's not, it doesn't have the check mark beside it. Now, if you want to, if you've done some patterns that you like, you can always do Export Selected Patterns. And I'm going to select some patterns first. Holding Shift, you can select them all one by one, click, 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 and head to Export Selected Patterns. Photoshop's going to ask me, where do you want to do with these? I'm going to call this my Purple Baroque Bunny series. And it's saving as a .pat. That is a specific pattern file just for Photoshop. So if you've got all these great patterns, you can export it and save it as a pattern, because if you open up another Illustrator or sorry, Photoshop software on a computer that doesn't have all your patterns on it, you can't access them. So you can always then save the pattern file, the .pat, and then head down to Import Patterns. and you'll see the different .pat sets that you have. You open those up, and Photoshop will have them ready for you. I definitely recommend you save all of your patterns in a separate file so you can easily access them later. Okay, so another thing I like to do is when I'm designing something, I like to try it out in different scale, right? Like I like to see how it looks small, see how it looks big, try it out in different colors. And these are just squares that I have filled with the pattern fill, right? And you can always scale it up or down to see how it looks, scale it down to see how the repeat goes, scale it up to check the resolution, make sure it looks nice. Now, the other thing you can do with the pattern fill dialog box, which you get by double clicking on your little fill here, is you can angle the pattern as well, which is handy for us as designers because fabrics may not be going all in the same direction. Definitely not like on a shirt or a coat. So you can angle the whole pattern to show that it's on an angle, right? And let me just create a selection. Oops. Let me make sure I'm working on a new layer because again, Photoshop's going to be weird about me on that layer. And then I can fill it, and then I can scale it up or down. And I can also rotate it. Might be easier to see with a different pattern. Let me just find a good stripe. You cannot go wrong with a stripe. The interesting thing about stripe patterns is that where I have a square swatch for something like a pattern fill, for a stripe, I have a tiny little strip. It's literally just like, if you look at the swatch itself, it is really not very thick. It's just across the various colors. It doesn't have to be as comprehensive as something like this because it's not having the information from the top and the bottom of the square. Let me just put in some shapes and fill them. There we go. I'm going to make that a lot smaller scale. And then I'm going to give it a little bit of, right? So if you want to angle a stripe to get a nice diagonal, you can do that in like 2 seconds. Create a new pattern just there, hit OK. And it remembers where you've angled it in the artwork. So if I put in something else, it's going to keep that angle, right? Which is very handy. I like to, when I'm working with various colorways, have an abstract, a stripe, a plaid. Keep that one move over here. And pattern, lemon. There we go. Okay. So you've got coordinating like a collection that the patterns, they all go together really nicely. You can never go wrong with a good stripe. If you have all the colors in the swatch already, create a stripe real quick and you'll have it as part of the program very easily. There we go. Okay, so that is filling, organizing, and designing your beautiful repeat patterns. Okay, so if you want to add your patterns to a fashion illustration, it's very straightforward. You can either, use the selection tool, the various tools, object, quick selection, magic wand, depending which one works, to select the area of the garment that you are looking for. That doesn't always work though, because with something like this, my illustration, let's see what Photoshop's going to try to give to me. Here we go. That's not bad. Okay. That's not terrible. But I still think for something like this, I would rather use either the lasso or the polygonal because I can get some really nice detail, if it is not easy to select it. The polygonal is not bad because then you can just go in and click, 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 click. And if you keep the clicks pretty tiny, you can trace out various parts of your garment quite easily. Always remember to go back to where you started and close it like that. And then you've got the dancing ants, and that can be very easily filled with whatever you want to put in there in terms of your pattern. You can fill that with color. Okay, so it looks like nothing's in there because my scale is so large on the original artwork. So I have to take that down so I can see even what I've got in there. Not bad. Whoop, that's too teeny. Sometimes if the slider's not precise enough, you may want to go up and actually type in the numbers. That's pretty good for what I'm looking for. Okay, same idea. I'm going to do a selection on my sleeve. I knew that was 5%, so I'm going to keep that, but I am going to give it a little bit of an angle. So it's not super identical to what I have on the bodice. It gives it a feeling of, there's a little bit of fidelity to what's happening with the fabric on the body. And then you can continue. A double click will close it. If you can't figure out where the original point was, you can do a double click on the keypad and that will close your shape anyway. And I'm going to fill. And gradually put my outfit together, filled with all of these beautiful textiles. And you can have like as many pieces of the garment as you want. Like if it's pieced together, then piece together the fills of the textiles. You can do cool things with your background. Um, really, the sky's the limit with this. And that is how you can add your custom repeat patterns and textiles to your own fashion illustrations.